I never thought it would end like this. It wasn't a huge fight or some dramatic event that led to this moment. No, it was something much quieter, much more sinister. It started with silence. I remember the first time I noticed it. How strange the silence felt between us. We hadn't fought. There were no raised voices, no anger or tears. It was just an absence, a thick, unspoken gap where words used to be. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, creeping change. But that evening, it became undeniable. The air felt colder in the house, even though it was summer. I could feel it in the way she moved through the rooms, how she'd pass by me without a glance, how she'd say goodnight in that flat tone, as though it was just a routine. No warmth, no affection. It was like a stranger had taken her place, and the woman I had once known, loved, was slowly slipping away. That night, we were sitting in the living room after dinner, both of us doing our own thing, pretending everything was fine. I was on my phone, scrolling through some random news stories, and she was watching TV. But even then, I felt it. The distance. It was as if there were a wall between us, even though we were only a few feet apart. I could almost hear the ticking of the clock, marking the time we were losing. Out of nowhere, she put the remote down and turned to me. Her face was serious, but I couldn't read it. There was something in her eyes, something that made my stomach twist with unease. I remember the way she looked at me, almost like she was looking through me, not at me. "I don't want you to touch me anymore," she said. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even a raised voice. It was a calm statement. Flat. Empty. Like she had already said goodbye in her mind. For a moment, I couldn't process it. I blinked, waiting for some kind of explanation, but none came. She just sat there, looking at me, waiting, as if I should understand, as if I should have already known what had been building up for months, maybe even longer. "I can't do this anymore," she added softly, her voice distant. "I'm sorry. I just can't." My mind raced, but I didn't know what to say. What do you say when someone you've shared your life with, someone you thought was your partner, tells you that they don't want you to touch them anymore? When did everything change? Was it me? Was it her? Was it both of us? I felt paralyzed, unable to move or respond. My body wanted to reach out, to pull her into my arms and hold her, to make her see that we could fix this. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on her face. Maybe it was the resignation in her voice. But I knew that if I tried to reach out now, it would only push her farther away. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear the sound of my own breath, the weight of her words pressing on me like a 100-pound stone. I didn't know if I should apologize, if I should beg for answers, or if I should just let it go. But I did nothing. I sat there, staring at her, unsure of what to do next. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending everything is fine," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. "I need space. I need distance." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't speak. It was as if the words had left me, leaving only a hollow emptiness where I once had certainty. She stood up and walked toward the bedroom without saying another word. I stayed on the couch, frozen. It was like everything was happening to someone else. I wasn't sure if this was real or if I was caught in some kind of nightmare. I wanted to follow her, to ask her why, to try to fix this, but I didn't. I couldn't. I knew that nothing I said would change what was already happening. She had made up her mind. The night dragged on in painful silence. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every thought in my mind felt like a jumbled mess, spinning faster and faster. How long had she felt this way? Why hadn't she told me sooner? Did she really not want me anymore? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix what had been broken. And the worst part was that I didn't even know where it all went wrong. All I knew was that the woman I loved, the woman who once made me feel like I was the only person in the world, was gone. And in her place was a person I no longer recognized. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours just lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened, trying to understand where we went wrong. The house felt different, like the walls were closing in on me. I kept hearing the words in my mind. "I don't want you to touch me anymore." I couldn't escape it. It was as if I was trapped in a loop, constantly replaying her words over and over. How did things get so bad? She was my partner. She was my best friend. And now, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She got up, made coffee, and we went through the motions of the day. It was like we were both pretending like everything was normal. but I could feel the distance. It was thick, heavy. There was a wall between us that I couldn't break down. At breakfast, I tried to talk to her, tried to ask if she was okay. But she just nodded, avoiding my gaze. There was something in her eyes, though, something I couldn't pinpoint. She wasn't looking at me with love anymore. It was more like she was looking past me. I didn't know what to do. Should I push her? Should I ask her what was going on? But then I remembered how she had shut me out the night before. I knew better than to force her to talk if she didn't want to. So, I kept quiet. We went about our day, both of us pretending everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. I knew something had changed. And the worst part? I didn't know if I could fix it. That night, I came home from work late. It was around 9 p.m., and I was exhausted. I walked into the house, expecting to find her sitting on the couch, like usual, maybe reading or watching something. But she wasn't there. I called out her name, but there was no answer. I went upstairs to the bedroom, thinking maybe she was there. The door was closed, so I knocked softly. No response. I hesitated, then opened the door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the window. Her back was to me, and for a second, I thought maybe she hadn't heard me come in. But then she turned around, and I could see it in her face. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She looked resigned, almost sad. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. My heart dropped. I had a feeling I knew what was coming. It wasn't going to be good. "About what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, like she was gathering the courage to say something she didn't want to say. "About us," she said, her voice steady but distant. "I've been thinking a lot, and I don't think we're good for each other anymore." The words hit me like a slap to the face. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "I think we've grown apart," she said, avoiding my gaze. "I don't feel the same way I used to. I don't think I can be the wife you want me to be anymore." I was frozen. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to yell, to scream at her, to ask her what happened to the woman I married. But instead, all I could do was stand there, unable to move. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I finally managed to ask. She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you. But I can't pretend anymore. It's not fair to either of us." I felt my world shatter. The woman I had spent years with, the woman who had been my partner, had already made up her mind. And I was left standing there, broken, confused, and scared. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice barely audible. "I don't know how to fix this." She shook her head. "I don't think there's anything to fix. I think we've reached the end." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that we could fix this, that we could talk it out and work through it. But she wasn't listening. She had already checked out. She had already made her decision. And nothing I said would change it. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, wandering around the house like a ghost. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. All I could do was replay those words in my head, over and over again. "I don't think we're good for each other anymore." It was like she had already left, even though she was still there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix something that felt so broken. The next few days passed in a blur. We barely spoke. When we did, it was short, impersonal. I was lost, completely lost. I didn't know how to navigate this new reality. It was as if the woman I had built my entire life around had disappeared, and in her place was a stranger. And what was worse, I couldn't even figure out how it happened. Was I the one who pushed her away? Or had I just been blind to everything that had been wrong for so long? Was it something she never even told me? Or was it just the way things were meant to end? All I knew was that she didn't want me anymore. And somehow, that hurt more than anything. It's strange how quickly things can shift from one reality to another. One moment, I was trying to understand what went wrong, and the next, I was standing in the middle of a life I didn't recognize, unable to escape the feeling that something had been stolen from me without my knowledge. The days that followed that conversation with Elena were a blur of silence, awkward glances, and forced routines. I would wake up next to her, but it felt like we were living separate lives under the same roof. Every morning felt like a new day of pretending. I'd get up, go to work, come home, and repeat the same empty cycle. But it wasn't until a week later that I realized something even more unsettling. She wasn't just distant. She was shutting me out entirely. I came home from work one evening, like I always did, expecting to find her in the kitchen or the living room. But the house was eerily quiet. I called out her name, but there was no response. Curious, I walked toward the bedroom. As I passed by, I noticed her purse on the kitchen counter. But what struck me wasn't the purse. It was the phone lying next to it. Her phone, sitting there, abandoned, as if she didn't care who saw it. It was a small thing, a simple phone left behind, but it felt like a crack in the facade I had been living under. It wasn't like Elena to just leave her phone anywhere, especially without a second thought. My heart started racing, and before I could stop myself, I picked it up. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. But in that moment, I couldn't help it. I unlocked her phone, my hands shaking. I scrolled through her messages, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The first thing I noticed was the way her conversations had changed. There were texts that had never existed before. Messages with a name I didn't recognize, David. They were casual at first, just friendly exchanges, but the more I scrolled, the more uncomfortable I became. There were mentions of late-night calls, meetings, things that didn't add up. And then I found it. A message from just the night before. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. Just a few more days. My heart sank. It felt like the world had dropped out from under me. My wife, the woman I had loved, had been lying to me. She had been seeing someone else. The betrayal hit me harder than I could have imagined. I had seen the signs, sure, but I had dismissed them. I had convinced myself that it was just a phase, that we could work through it. But now I had the proof. I sat there in the kitchen, holding her phone in my hands, trying to process what I had just discovered. A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, but another part of me knew that there was no point. The damage was already done. I had always been the kind of person who avoided confrontation. I never liked arguments, never liked drama. But now, I felt like I had been pushed into a corner where there was no escape. The woman I thought I knew had betrayed me, and all I could do was sit there, staring at her phone, wondering how I had missed all the signs. She came home later that evening, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the phone lying open in front of me. When she walked in, she froze for a second, as if she had just realized what I had found. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, her eyes darting between me and the phone. Then, in a voice that was softer than I expected, she said, "I didn't want you to find out like this." I stood up, unable to contain the anger that had been building inside me. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "How long has this been going on?" She looked away, guilt and fear in her eyes. "I never meant for it to happen," she whispered, her voice cracking. It just did. I didn't know how to stop it." I couldn't process what she was saying. The words didn't make sense. "You didn't know how to stop it?" I repeated. "You didn't know how to stop seeing someone else behind my back? How do you even explain that? How do you explain throwing away everything we had?" She looked like she was about to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she just dropped her head, unable to meet my gaze. The silence between us was suffocating. The betrayal, the lies, everything about this situation felt like it was closing in on me. It wasn't just the affair, it was the realization that I had been living a lie. That the person I had trusted more than anyone else had been hiding this secret from me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of a reality that no longer made sense. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. "I can't do this," I said, my voice low and broken. "I can't pretend like everything is fine when it's not. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know who you are anymore." She didn't respond. She didn't argue. She just stood there, silent, as if she had already made her peace with the situation. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I wanted to fix it, no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't change what had already been broken. The walls between us had been built long before that night. And now, they were too high for either of us to tear down. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at her, the phone still open on the kitchen table between us. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. Every breath felt heavier than the last. She didn't move, didn't try to explain herself. There was nothing she could say that would make it better, not now. I wanted to shout at her, demand answers for everything. The late nights, the distance, the lies. But instead, I stayed silent, my mind racing a million miles a minute. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Was it all an act? Were those years of our life together just a performance? "I never wanted to hurt you," Elena finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was sharp enough to cut through the tension. "It just happened. I don't know how." I wanted to laugh, but there was no humor in it. "How?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. How does something like this just happen? You didn't wake up one day and decide to start an affair. You didn't just accidentally fall in love with someone else. This took time. This took choices. This was deliberate. Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. There was no defense for what she had done. I had always been a passive person in our relationship, avoiding conflict whenever I could. But tonight, I wasn't that person anymore. This wasn't something I could just ignore, something I could sweep under the rug. My life, my marriage, everything I had built with her, was it all a lie? I dropped the phone back onto the table, my hands shaking. I couldn't look at it anymore. I couldn't look at her. Who is he? I asked, not because I needed to know, but because the question was eating at me from the inside. She swallowed hard before answering, her voice trembling. His name is David. We met through work, and things just escalated. Escalated. I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. What does that even mean? You let it happen. You let it go this far. I know, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry. Her apology felt hollow. I wanted to believe her, to feel some glimmer of hope that we could fix this. But the truth was, something inside me had already shattered. The trust we had built, the foundation of our marriage, had crumbled in a matter of days. And there was nothing she could do to rebuild it. I didn't know what to say next. My mind was a blur of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion. I was trying to process everything that had just come to light, but it felt impossible. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been blind to so much. How long? I asked, my voice barely audible. How long has this been going on? A few months, she admitted, her eyes filled with shame. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like a knife twisting deeper with each word. A few months. I repeated, my voice shaking. So this wasn't just some one-time mistake. You've been hiding this from me for months, lying to my face, pretending like everything was fine. I didn't know how to stop it, she said again, her voice full of regret. I never meant for things to get this far. I stood up, unable to stay in the same room any longer. I needed air. I needed space to breathe, to think. Everything was moving too fast, and I was drowning in it. I walked out onto the porch, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. The stars above seemed so distant, so far away. In that moment, I couldn't imagine ever feeling the same way again. I didn't know if I could ever trust Elena again, not after everything she had done. And the worst part was, I didn't know what to do next. Was there any way to salvage this? Or was it already too late? I stood outside for what felt like hours, the cold air biting at my skin, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered in that moment. I couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened. The woman I had spent years with, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, had shattered everything. My mind kept going back to one thing. How could she do this? How could she be so cold? How could she so easily betray the life we had built together? I don't know how long I was out there, lost in my own thoughts, before I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Elena. I could feel her presence even without looking. But I didn't move. I didn't want to. Paul. Her voice was softer than I expected, almost hesitant. She stepped forward but stopped a few feet away from me, as if she were unsure whether to get closer. I didn't say anything. I didn't even acknowledge her presence. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies, the betrayal. The woman I once loved was no longer the same person. She was someone else entirely. I'm sorry, she whispered, and I could hear the rawness in her voice. I never wanted it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you. Her apology felt like nothing. It was just words, empty and meaningless. How could sorry fix this? How could a few words undo months of lies, of secrets hidden in plain sight? I don't know what to say, she continued, her voice trembling now. I wish I could take it all back. I finally turned around, my eyes locking onto hers. Her face was streaked with tears, but I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel any of the sympathy I thought I would. Instead, I just felt numb. You can't take it back, I said quietly. My voice was steady, but inside, I felt like I was falling apart. This isn't something you can undo. She closed her eyes, like she couldn't bear to look at me anymore. And honestly, I couldn't blame her. How could she face me after everything she had done? How could I face her? There was no more pretending, no more hope that things could go back to how they were. I still love you, she whispered, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the woman I had married. But I don't know if that's enough anymore. I don't know if we can fix this. The weight of her words hit me like a wave, drowning me in confusion and anger. She still loved me? After everything? How could she say that with a straight face? You don't love me, I said, the words coming out harsh, almost venomous. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to me for months. You wouldn't have let it get to this point. She flinched at my words, her face crumpling in sorrow. I never wanted it to get this far, she repeated, but it sounded hollow. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I turned away, walking down the porch steps. I needed to get away from her, from this house, from everything. But as I walked, I heard her footsteps following me. Please, Paul, don't walk away from me. I stopped in my tracks. I wanted to turn around, to say something that would make sense, something that would bring us back to where we were before. But I couldn't. It was too late for that. You don't get it, Elena, I said, my voice cold now, almost emotionless. You've already walked away from me. You just don't realize it yet. With that, I left. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there any longer. Every part of me was screaming to escape, to get as far away from the pain as I could. The drive was a blur. My mind was still racing, still trying to process everything I had just learned. The affair, the lies, the betrayal, it was all too much. I stopped at a park on the outskirts of town, parking my car, and just sitting there in the dark, listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. I had no answers. I didn't know what to do, what my next move should be. Part of me wanted to drive away and never look back, but another part of me was clinging to the hope that somehow, someway, things could be fixed. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. Nothing could fix this. The woman I had trusted, the person I thought I could rely on, had destroyed everything in the blink of an eye. And I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life, unsure of where to go from here. I don't know how long I stayed at that park, but I was sure of one thing. I couldn't go back home. Not yet. Not with the storm of emotions crashing inside me. I had never felt so lost, so confused. It was as if someone had torn away the rug beneath me and left me standing on bare, cold ground. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her, demand answers, or perhaps beg her to tell me what had happened to us. But then I realized I didn't even know what to ask. What good were questions now? What was the point of trying to understand when everything felt like a lie? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I almost didn't want to look at it. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the best of me. I pulled it out, and for a brief moment, I hoped it would be a sign, something to make all of this make sense. It was Elena. Paul, please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Talk? How was that even possible? What could we say to each other now? She had already chosen her path, and there was no going back from that. But a part of me, some small, irrational part, still wanted to try. Still wanted to believe that we could fix this. But could we? I had to admit it. Part of me didn't want to go back because I was terrified of hearing the same thing again, of seeing the same empty look in her eyes that I had seen earlier. Part of me wanted to escape the pain, to run as far away as possible and never look back. But I couldn't run forever. I typed a quick response. I don't know what we can talk about anymore. I hesitated before hitting send, wondering if I should add something else, but then I just let it go. It wasn't long before she responded. I'm sorry, Paul. Please. I just need to explain. I was torn. I didn't want to go back to that house, not after everything. But I also knew deep down that if I didn't face her now, I might never get the closure I needed. And I didn't know if I could live with that. I drove back, slowly, my mind clouded with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making any sense. The house looked just as I had left it, the front door slightly ajar as if nothing had happened. It was almost like I had stepped into a parallel world, where nothing was different, but everything was. I stood in front of the door for what felt like an eternity, trying to gather the courage to step inside, but I couldn't. I didn't know if I was ready to face what waited for me inside. Finally, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Elena was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her head lowered as though she were waiting for me to speak first. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know where to start. Everything felt wrong. How could you fix something that had already been broken beyond repair? She looked up at me with those same apologetic eyes. I don't know where to begin, Paul. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand something. I crossed the room, standing in front of her. The distance between us felt monumental, even though we were just a few feet apart. What could you possibly say to make this right? I asked, my voice a mix of anger and exhaustion. You've already made your choice. What is there to explain? She took a shaky breath. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for things to spiral out of control, but I couldn't stop it, and I didn't know how to tell you. I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold emptiness. So that's it. You just didn't know how to tell me? You didn't think about how this would destroy everything we built? Her eyes filled with tears. I did think about it. Every day. But I didn't know how to face you, how to tell you that I had. I had fallen out of love with you. That something was missing. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected it. I had feared it. But hearing it, actually hearing it, was a whole different kind of pain. Do you even realize what you're saying? I whispered, my voice breaking. You're telling me that after everything, after all these years, you just stopped loving me? And then you went and found someone else? Behind my back? I never wanted it to be this way, she said again, her voice breaking as she reached out toward me. I never meant to fall for him. It just happened. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't hear it anymore. I couldn't stand the excuses, the guilt, the remorse that was spilling out of her. She was sorry, but it was too late for apologies. Too late for any of it. I don't think I can do this anymore, Elena, I said, my voice low and steady. I don't think I can live in a world where I'm not enough for you. She looked at me, a mix of sadness and regret in her eyes. But I wasn't looking for her pity. I wasn't looking for her to feel sorry for me. What I needed was for her to understand the weight of what she had done, the damage she had caused. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice so small it was almost inaudible. But I think it's over. And just like that, I knew. I knew that no matter how much we both tried, no matter how many apologies or explanations we exchanged, nothing would ever be the same again. She had already chosen her path, and I had no choice but to follow mine. I stood there, staring at her, the words sinking in slowly but painfully. It's over. The finality of it echoed in my mind, drowning out any remaining thoughts of reconciliation. What was the point of trying to fix something that had already been broken so thoroughly? It was like a bridge that had been burned, and no matter how many times I tried to rebuild it, the ashes would always be there, reminding me of the damage. I couldn't respond at first. What was there to say? She was right. As much as it hurt, as much as I didn't want to accept it, she had already made her decision. And deep down, I think I had too. There was no going back from this. She stood up slowly, her face wet with tears. Paul, please. I didn't want it to end like this. I didn't want to destroy everything we had. Her voice cracked, and for a brief moment, I almost felt a flicker of the love I once had for her. Almost. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Once. The love, the trust, the connection. We had been so close, so intertwined in each other's lives, but now it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking at a world I couldn't reach. You did destroy it, I said, my voice colder than I intended. You destroyed everything, Elena. You can't just say sorry and expect it to fix itself. I can't just forget what you did. Her face crumpled as though I had slapped her. The pain in her eyes mirrored my own, but it didn't matter. I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't give her the reassurance she was looking for. She had taken something irreplaceable from me, and no amount of tears could ever make up for it. I know, she whispered, barely holding it together. I've been a terrible person. I've ruined everything. I never wanted to hurt you, Paul. But I did. I didn't know what to do with her apology. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear it. It was that it didn't matter anymore. The trust was gone. The betrayal was too raw. No words could undo the damage. I need to leave, I said abruptly, before the suffocating silence could settle in further. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Leave? Where are you going? We need to talk. We need to figure this out. I shook my head, the frustration boiling up again. There's nothing left to figure out. You made your choice, and I'm not going to keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I can't stay here anymore. She reached out, but I stepped back instinctively, the distance between us growing with every passing second. I don't want you to leave, she pleaded, her voice trembling. Please don't leave me like this. We can try again. I'll do whatever it takes. But I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back to a life where I had to second-guess every word, every gesture. I couldn't go back to pretending I didn't know about her affair, pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I don't think I can be the person you want me to be anymore, I said quietly, the words barely escaping my lips. Her eyes filled with panic, and for a moment, she looked lost. Please, Paul, she begged again. I don't want to lose you. But I was already halfway out the door, the weight of everything still hanging over me like a dark cloud. As I stepped out into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the life I had known, the life I had fought so hard to build, was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was looking for. But all I knew was that I couldn't stay. Not now. Not after everything. I walked aimlessly, not caring where my feet took me, only needing to escape the suffocating reality of the life I had been living. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what came next. All I knew was that the man who had once been so sure of everything had become a stranger to himself. And Elena? She was just a shadow of the woman I had once loved. A shadow of the life we had shared, now forever altered by the weight of her choices. I didn't look back, because sometimes walking away is the only thing you can do when everything else is already gone. I don't know how long I walked that night. Hours, maybe. The city felt empty, quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My mind was spinning, tangled in thoughts of Elena, of everything that had gone wrong, and everything I was leaving behind. But in that moment, the one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stay in that house, in that life, any longer. When I finally stopped walking, I found myself at a small cafe near the park, one of those places that had always been a quiet escape for me. I sat down at a table by the window, staring out at the street as the world continued to move around me. I ordered a coffee, though I hadn't wanted one in years. I needed something to ground me, something to stop the swirling chaos in my head. The warmth of the cup in my hands brought me back to the present. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The fog in my mind began to clear, and I realized something that had been hidden from me for too long. This was my life, my choice, my future. I had always been so focused on Elena, on our life together, that I had forgotten who I was outside of that. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to a version of life that wasn't real anymore. But the truth was, there was still so much ahead of me. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine to walk, and it started with this small moment of clarity. As I sat there, I pulled out my phone, not to check messages, not to look for answers in things that would only hurt. Instead, I opened my notes and started writing. I wrote about the past, about the pain, about the mistakes, and most importantly, I wrote about the future. I wrote about the things I wanted to do, the places I wanted to see, the person I wanted to become. And in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't just walking away from Elena. I was walking towards myself. Days passed, and slowly, I began to rebuild. I started taking care of myself, not just physically, but mentally. I went for long walks, rediscovered old hobbies I'd abandoned, and most importantly, I started talking to friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I learned to laugh again, to enjoy the small things that I'd once taken for granted. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed the life I'd had, days when the memories of Elena haunted me. But I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with the pain, accepting it, and using it to grow. The more I embraced the discomfort, the more I saw that it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I got a call from Elena. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I answered. "Hey, Paul," she said, her voice softer than it had been in a long time. "I've been thinking a lot. I know I hurt you, and I'll never be able to make up for it. But I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm still trying to figure things out, and I know I can't undo the past, but I hope you find happiness." I sat there for a moment, absorbing her words. I had spent so long holding on to anger and regret, but now I felt something different. I felt peace. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about me. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm. "I hope you find the same." We hung up, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd imagined or hoped for, but it was real. It was the next step in my life. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was mine to walk. And that was enough for now. I had learned that sometimes the hardest part of life is knowing when to walk away. But it's also the first step toward finding something better. And even though the past would always be a part of me, I knew that my future was wide open, full of possibility, full of hope. And that was all I needed to move forward. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. And this time, it felt real.